It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, it is great to have you in studio with us today. National Weather Service is with us. Tom Clemens, meteorologist. Welcome to studio.
Thank you.
Been talking to you for what, 15, 20 years now, I think?
It's been...
It's our first time meeting face-to-face, actually.
Yeah, about 15 years.
Yeah, about 15 years. So Tom Clemens, you've heard him numerous times on the radio over the years, whether it be our weekend weather forecast or maybe there's a wildfire going on, and we call and talk to Tom about what's going on with the weather for wildfires. So he's in studio today. Before we get into what you actually came down here to do today, May and June have been really bizarre months weather-wise.
Right.
And so I'm sure the Weather Service has probably been, I imagine you guys are pretty giddy when you have these things happening and you get, these records happening, records being broken all over the place. May and June have been like that for you guys.
Yeah, we've seen record warmth. It was almost warmer in April and March than it was in May. Mm-hmm. And May was a really cool month, a really wet month, and if you've lived around Arizona, you would know that May is usually two things happen in May. It becomes hot and dry.
Right.
And that was the opposite of what happened in the back in March and April when the Climate Prediction Center put out their forecasts. They were showing pretty moist conditions down in the Southwest. That was favoring a moist spring, and it turned out to be a fairly moist spring on us, and not only moist, but it was also cool. So.
Right, yeah, I mean, we have had some snow in May, which I don't recall having snow in May in quite some time, just that slushy kind of stuff coming down. But it was very cool, very wet. And then June has been really bizarre, too. The first half of it, at least, has been out of the ordinary.
It was very similar to May. We kept getting these what we saw pretty much for the whole winter season is a high-pressure ridge off the west coast, and that was sending most of our storm activity up well to the north and keeping California and Arizona pretty dry. And that finally broke down, and then we began to see storms coming in. We've been waiting for these storms that normally get during, January, February, and March, and bring us a lot of snow and sometimes heavy rain. And finally, they started showing up in the Southwest. But by this time of the year, climatologically, we're a lot drier. So they did produce some pretty good rainfall across the area.
Oh, some great rainfall. I mean,
so we
thunder.
broke some records, not only in temperature, but also in precipitation for this time of year. Not records, but we were approaching some of the...
It's been beautiful. I mean, if you think about it, May and June, typically the hottest and driest months of the year, and they've been anything but. Now of course, June has arrived, mid-June, and we've got what is an excessive heat watch in place for elevations below 4,000 feet in Yavapai County through Monday evening. So the hot is here, which is a good thing. Now, we're still not going to get into what Tom is actually here to talk about today, but since you're here, I want to talk to you about this. We hear a lot of words about El Nino, that it's happening out in the Pacific. What can you tell us about that right now, and what does that mean for us?
Yeah, we were pretty much seeing, well, let me start with El Nino is, it's basically a reverse in the circulation pattern in the Pacific. And what happens is the upwelling currents, which typically go along on the eastern Pacific, and those upwelling currents bring cooler water up to the surface, and those with the circulation pattern breaking down, the atmospheric circulation pattern breaking down, that allows the patterns to change, and we don't get the upwelling currents weaken, and then we begin to see sea surface temperatures beginning to warm up. And believe it or not, sea surface temperatures have a major impact on the atmospheric circulation patterns, and what we like to see in weather forecasting and meteorology is that creates a lot of storm activity is a temperature difference between over certain areas, and Mother Nature likes to kind of smooth out and try to balance things out. And so when we get these warm sea surface temperatures, and right now it's pretty strong. It's about 2.5 standard deviations above what it typically is at this time of year. And so we're anticipating that we're going to get into fairly moderate to strong El Nino. It's a little harder to predict the strength over a duration of time, but they're kind of showing about a 90 to 80% confidence as we go into this winter of seeing at least a moderate El Nino event.
Last winter we had a weak El Nino, and it never really did much for us. I remember talking about that with you guys. So this year our El Nino is building and it's doing quite well.
Yes.
That's what you're telling me.
Yes.
And then will that affect our monsoon, or does that not affect anything until we see our winter?
It can have a mild effect on our monsoon, and it all depends on climate variability as well too. But it typically has a greater impact on our winter. Like I was saying earlier, with that warmer sea surface temperatures along the eastern Pacific, it helps give the storms the energy that they need, and we typically see a wetter pattern over the at least the southern section of the country, and that includes Arizona, of course. And so we're kind of hoping for that because it was a rather dry and dismal snow year last year.
I guess, yeah, our winter was pretty mild this last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Last winter was very mild.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I only shoveled a couple of times, and it wasn't very much.
Yeah, we had snow amounts. I think we're still kind of in the 60s on our snowfall measurements, and that is fairly below normal, even for Flagstaff. And when we were going into February and March, just looking at the satellite imagery, you can see the snow from the satellite, and there was very little snow, especially over the mountains of New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of all the way up into California. The snowpack was very minimal, and that's the reason why California continues to have a lot of issues with water and stuff like that going on right now. So hopefully with this transitioning into an El Nino year, as you've seen in Texas, they were pretty dry up until this year, and now now they're wishing the water would stop.
Right. I mean, they're talking about a foot of rain and stuff at a time coming in, so it's pretty nuts. How long have you been with the National Weather Service in Belmont?
I've been here since '01, so that's what, 14, 15.
Okay, about as long as I've been talking to you.
Yeah.
So the whole time. Okay, let's take our first break.
Okay.
National Weather Service meteorologist Tom Clemens in studio today. I'm Paul David. Stick around. Countywide will be back in just a couple minutes.
Of all the things you've done with your bike, donating it to Goodwill may be the most incredible of all. Your donations help fund job placement and training for people in your community, which means your stuff can be more powerful than you think. Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making Home Affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
welcome back to Countywide. Tom Clemens with the National Weather Service in Belmont in studio today. Not only is he a meteorologist, but you are also an incident meteorologist.
Yes.
That is a little different, I would say. You actually are on call to respond to things. That's exactly why Tom was here, because we've been doing a lot of wildfire stories and heat stories and, you know, all those kinds of stories going on. Back when it was really dry, and I was kind of expecting fire restrictions to go into place so much earlier this year, we kind of started getting the fire departments in and the Forest Service in, and Brian Klimowski was in already once this year to give us kind of a summer prediction. Now you're back because I thought, there is one aspect that we've never discussed on the show in terms of wildfire season, and that is the role that the National Weather Service has, because you guys actually go out to these wildfires, and you're an important piece of the puzzle for these firefighters that are going out there and putting their lives in danger. So exactly what does your job entail when it comes to being an incident meteorologist?
Well, we basically respond through the same system that when they call up an incident management team out to a fire, the same system calls us up, and they'll get out to the fire. They'll assess the situation and say, we need a incident meteorologist out here. So they'll call us up through that same system, and we'll get a call, and there's quite a few of us. There's I would say probably about 2/3, 80% of every National Weather Service office has an incident meteorologist on board.
Oh, really? Okay. Does it require a lot of extra training?
It requires some specific training.
Okay.
And you got to get certified in the training to basically serve the incident management team. And
I imagine you probably need quite a few in Arizona. I guess any state you need quite a few of you guys to be able to do this, or gals doing this, because, I mean, you get several wildfires popping up. You can't exactly be jumping from, because you respond to the wildfire.
Right, right. And wherever these wildfires occur, and we've heard several of them, over the years we've seen several of them occur here in Arizona. These incident management teams go right to those fires. They find an optimal location where they can basically set up fire camp, and it literally is a fire camp, because a lot of them usually will set up in a park, any location that's within a reasonable distance from the fire, and then all of these crews, even the hand crews, all of the tankers and all of that equipment is staged right in the proximity of the fire, and then the incident management team is right there in the park or at the school or wherever they choose to set up, and they manage the overall fire, all the resources coming in, the crews going out. They work out the strategy of how to attack the fire, and weather is usually the cause and the start of the fire, and it also affects how you are going to manage the fire, and that's where we come in and usually get called up on some fires that are close to urban areas or close to other towns or cities, and if there's a threat that fire is going to affect, places nearby, they usually will set up a special incident management team. There's different levels of incident management teams.
Right.
And we become we integrate right in with that incident management team.
You're part of that incident management team.
Right.
So if there's a wildfire, like, as you mentioned there, if it's threatening structures, like right now there's a wildfire down in Kearney it burned a couple of homes yesterday, and it's a hazard. It's burning homes down. That is the moment that you come in and the weather becomes more important. Or is it any of the fires? Because the Coconino National Forest and Kaibab, they both have management fires going right now. Do they call you and say, hey, do we need anything specific for today with a management fire? Or is it just pretty much when homes are being threatened? Like the Slide Fire last year was creeping its way up Oak Creek Canyon, and of course there were tons of homes down there that were being endangered, not to mention the ones on top of the rim. Is it just when homes are in danger? and people are in danger, that you respond and give kind of a weather forecast for that area, or?
It depends on the resources that are being affected. Like we've had some fires, and huge fires in some of the national parks, like out in Yellowstone, Half Dome out in California was just a few years ago, Yosemite, and they had type 1 incident management teams on those, because they were affecting some critical national resources, and it also includes when these fires get very close to urban areas or are burning towards or going to appear to threaten an urban area. And then that's when they call out these incident management teams to basically stop the fire and slow it down and try to get people out of the area safely. And then our job when we come into a fire is we provide the weather on scene right there at the fire and around the fire. When they feel that they can't handle, just because a lot of the local offices will support, their meteorologists will support the use fires that like Coconino's got going right now, the Horse Tank, for example. They'll call us and then we'll give them a weather forecast, what we call as a spot forecast.
Gotcha.
But then when they feel that they need someone on scene to give briefings, to basically look more closely at the weather around the fire, because when homes are threatened and firefighters, lives are at stake, they want the weather really dialed in, because weather is the main ingredient that helps drive the fire. And
now, what about? There is a difference. I mean, Arizona weather already is difficult to predict. I've talked to you guys numerous times about this, just the different elevations and the different terrains and topography and everything. A wildfire itself, burning, alters the weather in that area. So that's got to be quite a challenge. Tom has brought a bunch of equipment. I don't know if we're even going to get to this today because we're already getting ready for our second break, but he's brought all kinds of equipment. You basically have a little weather center you set up inside these little cities and towns they build when a wildfire is happening, and you have this equipment there so you can do a weather forecast. But the weather forecast outside of the wildfire is different than what the weather is actually doing inside the area of the fire. Is that right? Yeah,
and then you've got to take in the localized effects, and we learn very quickly, especially as fire weather forecasters, what local effects can have on the fires. And we actually will work with the fire behavior. We all work together as a team, and I work primarily alongside the fire behavior analysts, and we work together. And we'll actually bring in what they call RAWS weather stations, and they'll set these up within the fire perimeter, in the best places so that they don't get burned over, of course. But they'll give us the temperature, the dew point, and winds around the fire.
Oh, wow, okay.
And we closely monitor. I mean, those are kind of like our three ingredients. If you've got above normal temperatures, that's pushing moisture out of the fuels. That's helping dry the fuels. Wind will also do that. Wind will also aggravate the fire behavior. And then, of course, relative humidity is another factor in the drying process. And so we monitor those. We look for what we call critical weather around the fires. If there's thunderstorms developing near the fire, thunderstorms typically can produce lightning, which is a hazard to the firefighters. They also can produce what we call microburst winds, and we can go from like calm conditions around the fire, and these outflow winds hit the fire, and we've seen numerous times where it's just caused major blow-ups on the fire. And our job is to kind of watch these aspects and then warn operations that these events are likely going to occur at this time, and they'll start moving their resources and changing their tactics on how they're fighting the fire at that moment, just to protect the fire crews. They may even do evacuations if the weather is going to get that out of hand.
All right, we got to take another break. Tom Clemens with the National Weather Service in studio today. We'll be back in just a couple minutes with more Countywide. Stick around.
Cinderella found the pet that fits her perfectly. Tiana gave her pet the royal treatment. Belle found beauty where no one else did. And you can too. Share your heart. Share your love. Bring home your forever friend. Make a shelter pet part of your world. Happily Ever After begins at theshelterpetproject.org.
Hi, may I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Okay.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. We got just about a minute left of the program. Weather.gov/Flagstaff. That's where actually I get the weather forecast that you hear me read all the time. I don't predict the weather forecast. I get it from these guys. They're the ones that bring it to me. Tom Clemens is in the studio today. Real quick, we didn't get much of a chance to go through some of the equipment, but real fast, tell us, this is your kind of your weather center that you take with you.
Right. And I use a laptop computer, but the laptop computer basically brings the same weather that I use in the office down kind of on a laptop scale. I could look at all the weather forecast models that we use to put the weather together. We launch weather balloons all around the country, and I actually take these out to the fire, hook them up to my computer, collect the data, download the data, and send them off to the National Center for Environmental Prediction. That goes into the weather models, and then I use we typically use balloons to tie our sondes onto, and these are very similar to the sondes that we use at our office. And then I take local observations if I need to, right there at the incident command post. The other things I use too is just the same equipment I use in the office is radar. One time I was out on a fire, and we had a fire that was starting to get plume dominated, and I could actually use the radar and say, hey, it's collapsing right now, and I told operations. And they had some really strong winds near the fire, and they were able to evacuate and do what they needed to do to get people out of the way when the plume was collapsing. And I use our National Weather Service radar to be able to check that out and say, and let them know. So
weather is critical when it comes to wildfires.
Yes,
and fighting them and tracking them. All right, Tom, thanks for coming down. Great to meet you face to face.
I like talking about the weather.
Yeah, I do too.
Put me on my porch swing, and we'll have a good time.
If there's nothing else to talk about, there's always the weather. Weather.gov/Flagstaff. I'm Paul David. That's today's Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.